Emma loved old things. Antique shops were her havens. One rainy afternoon, she found a peculiar shop on a cobblestone street. Its window displayed a curious collection. An ornate mirror with a silver hue drew her in. A frail old man emerged, his eyes reflecting the dim light. "Interested in the mirror, are you?" he rasped. Emma nodded, captivated by its strange allure. She paid for her treasure, her heart thrumming with anticipation. The rain had stopped as she left the shop. Back in her small apartment, Emma unwrapped the mirror, her fingers lingering on its cold frame. It was even more striking in the warm, lamplit room. The silver surface seemed to shimmer, as if something moved beneath its depths. Brushing aside a prickle of unease, Emma found the perfect spot for it, above her fireplace. The mirror seemed to fit there, an antique jewel against the exposed brick. It reflected the flickering flames, casting dancing shadows across the walls. For a long moment, Emma stood before it, captivated by its strange beauty. Her reflection stared back, an exact copy, yet different. There was a depth to the mirror's reflection, an intensity that felt almost alive. Shaking off the unsettling feeling, Emma turned away. It was just an old mirror, after all, a trick of the light. She went about her evening, the mirror's presence a constant in the back of her mind. The next few days passed without incident. Emma grew accustomed to the mirror's presence in her apartment. She found herself drawn to it, spending hours gazing at her reflection, losing herself in its silvery depths. Sometimes she imagined she saw fleeting shapes in its surface, shadows that vanished when she blinked. At night, she sometimes thought she heard whispers coming from the mirror, faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to weave through her dreams. But when she woke, heart pounding, the room was always silent. It had to be her imagination, she told herself. The stress of work, the city noises filtering in from the street. Yet, a seed of unease had been planted. The shopkeeper's warning echoed in her mind. Was the mirror truly as harmless as it seemed? She dismissed the thought. It was ridiculous to be spooked by an inanimate object. A week passed, then another. Emma had almost forgotten the shopkeeper's warning. The mirror had become a part of her life, its strange presence fading into the background. It reflected her smiles as she got ready for work, her tired sighs at the end of a long day. Yet sometimes, late at night, she would catch a glimpse of movement in its depths. A flicker in the corner of her eye, a shadow that wasn't there a moment before, and the whispers returned, softer now, but undeniably present. They seemed to slither from the mirror's surface, weaving around her thoughts like tendrils of smoke. Emma tried to ignore them, to rationalize them away. She told herself it was the old building settling, the creaking pipes, the wind whistling through the chimney. But deep down, a cold fear began to blossom in her chest. The mirror wasn't just an antique, it was something more, something ancient and hungry. Section 5. Whispers in the Dark. One night, Emma woke with a start. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside her window. But something felt wrong. She could sense a presence in the room, a coldness that seeped into her bones. Her gaze darted to the mirror across the room. The silver surface glimmered faintly, reflecting the sliver of moonlight that pierced through the curtains. And then she saw it. A figure standing in the reflection, shrouded in darkness. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Emma froze, her heart pounding against her ribs. The figure moved closer, its form becoming clearer. It was a woman, her face obscured by shadows, but her eyes burned with a cold fire. Emma wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to obey. She was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear as the figure in the mirror reached out, its long, slender fingers brushing against the glass. A whisper escaped its lips, a sibilant hiss that seemed to slither into her mind. "Join me," it beckoned, its voice like silk and ice. Section 6. Shadows stir. Panic seized Emma. She tore her gaze from the mirror, her mind reeling. Had she imagined it? Was she losing her mind? She fumbled for the lamp switch, bathing the room in warm light. The mirror's surface was once again still, reflecting nothing but the familiar furniture and the tremor in her own wide eyes. She told herself it was a nightmare, a trick of the light, and her own overactive imagination. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in the pit of her stomach. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that something malevolent lurked just beyond her perception. From that night on, Emma avoided looking in the mirror. She covered it with a sheet, unable to bear the thought of seeing that ghostly figure staring back at her. But it didn't matter. The whispers continued, growing louder, more insistent. They seemed to seep from the very walls now, taunting her, promising something both alluring and terrifying. Section 7. A smirk in the reflection. Days turned into a blurry torment. Emma couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The whispers followed her everywhere, worming their way into her thoughts, her dreams. Exhaustion gnawed at her, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. One evening, drawn by an unseen force, Emma found herself standing before the shrouded mirror. The whispers seemed to intensify, urging her closer. With trembling fingers, she reached out and snatched away the sheet. The silver surface gleamed back at her, cold and hungry. Her reflection stared back, but something was different. Her reflection's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. A smile that wasn't mirrored on Emma's own face. Terror flooded her veins, icy and absolute. This was no trick of the light, no figment of her imagination. The mirror was alive, and it had taken hold of her reflection, twisting it into something strange and sinister. Section 8. Trapped. Emma stumbled back, a scream rising in her throat. But before she could make a sound, the mirror rippled. Like a pool of water disturbed by a falling stone, her reflection stretched, reaching towards her with grasping spectral hands. The whispers intensified, swirling around her like a vortex, pulling her closer. She tried to fight, to break free from their insidious grasp, but it was no use. It was like being sucked into a whirlpool, her struggles futile against the mirror's inexorable pull. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her was the triumphant gleam in her reflection's eyes. Then, silence. The room was still. The only sound the faint ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. The mirror hung on the wall, its surface smooth and serene. But it was no longer Emma's reflection that gazed out from its depths. It was the figure from her nightmares, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. Section 9. Awaiting the next. Trapped within the mirror's cold embrace, Emma found herself in a world of whispers and shadows. Her surroundings were a distorted reflection of her own apartment, familiar yet subtly wrong. The air was heavy, oppressive, filled with the scent of decay and a lingering sense of malice. She was a prisoner in her own reflection, her every move watched by the malevolent entity that now claimed this space as its own. She called out, desperate for any sign of the world she left behind, but her voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. The whispers surrounded her, taunting her with fragments of thoughts, echoes of her own fears. They spoke of the mirror's hunger, its endless appetite for souls to trap within its depths. They told her she was not the first, nor would she be the last. The mirror craved connection, a reflection to warp and twist into its own image. And Emma, with her fascination for the past, her longing for something more, had been the perfect prey. Section 10. The mirror's hunger. Back in the real world, the mirror hung silent and still. Its silver surface gleamed innocently in the moonlight, reflecting nothing but the empty room. It waited patiently, its hunger sated for now, but its appetite far from quelled. It would not be long before another soul, drawn by its strange allure, would fall prey to its seductive whispers. The mirror would claim them, just as it had claimed Emma, trapping them within its depths to become another face in its ever-growing collection of lost reflections. And so, the cycle would continue. The mirror's hunger an insatiable void, its whispers a siren song luring the unwary to their doom. For the mirror always had been, and always would be, a hungry thing, feeding on the reflections of the living, trapping them in its own distorted reality. and it would never be satisfied.